Here's what struck me. There's many directions we can go, but here's what struck me. Two things. One, the deaths of these first responders happened in an instant. Mm-hmm. For example, Joshua Owen, who was a police officer in Pope County, they're having dinner. The phone rings. His wife said she was accustomed to this. It's happened before. It was a domestic. He'll be right back. Well, of course, he didn't come back. All of these deaths were instantaneous, unexpectedly so. Mm-hmm. The second thing that struck me, and I had forgotten this. I've not been terribly delicate with Walz lately, but I'd even forgotten this. He was so loathed by these people that he was asked or told, don't even show up here. Now, he did show up in Burnsville, but he didn't stay long. Shannon Owen, the wife of the murdered copper up in Pope County, she was on the phone to him and said, "Don't show up here." Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to drift for a moment. We had a vice presidential nominee so loathed by law enforcement that he was asked to not show up at their funerals. That's amazing. But it's not just Walz. We have a city council in Minneapolis predisposed to be against law enforcement. You've got a mayor in Minneapolis who I don't think is predisposed to be against law enforcement, but he's in over his head. He doesn't know what to do. The governor, I believe, is predisposed to be against law enforcement. And here you tell the tale of these five fellows, one of whom, Jamal Mitchell. Well, they're all sad, but it's an incredible piece of work. But I think it shows as much about where we stand politically now as anything that you've done. Is that accurate?
You know, Joe, we're putting this together before we knew about Walz being selected as the VP candidate for Kamala Harris. So we were working on this summer, really to just take a look. This has never happened in Minnesota history before, to lose 5 first responders in such a short amount of time. And sadly, it seems that nobody wants to focus on the politics as to what, got us here. They make the news for a couple days, perhaps, the funeral is covered and that type of thing. And then everybody just moves on. These are the best of the best in our community that we're losing. And, what's happening in the minds of these officers each and every day that is then, making us all less safe as a result of the politics at play. And also wanted to combine the case against Ryan Londergren, a Minnesota state trooper who was charged with murder by Mary Moriarty. You have taxpayers footing the $500,000 plus bill for that in Hennepin County. And Chris Maddle is a very outspoken, amazing defense attorney who worked on that case. But really, for the first time, we see the public, we see people in Minnesota coming forward saying this is enough. We're not going to stand for this anymore. They're lining at the courthouse. They're there in support of Ryan. And then 3 days after Jamal Mitchell is murdered in the middle of the day, in the middle of the street in Minneapolis, you have Mary Moriarty drop the charges against Ryan Londergan. So just to take a look, and I think there's been
denying that Mitchell's death had anything to do with it.
It has
well, she's lying.
No politics at all. But just putting this together in a timeline, it's hard. I mean, I think it's a very difficult story to watch. And as I said, something we never even really wanted to do. It's so heartbreaking. But how is this going to get better if it's not exposed to sunlight and people don't talk about it?
The 5 fallen officers featured in this documentary are 3 from the Burnsville episode: Matthew Ruge, Paul Elmstrand, and Adam Finseth. Joshua Owen was answering a domestic call up in Pope County. And Jamal Mitchell, I think, would be the most recent. Wasn't that just late this summer?
The end of May. Mm-hmm.
Or, it was the end of May, just this past May. Explain to us the role Moriarty might have played in the Mitchell murder, because I believe she defended the fellow who shot Mitchell.
That's right. And we also try over at Alpha News to include details that we are well aware that the corporate media in this town leaves out. And that's one of them that really stood out to us. You know, Mary Moriarty comes from a background of being a public defender, the public defender for Hennepin County. And she represented the man who killed
Mustafa.
Mitchell. And that was a point that we knew people were aware of, but there was a reason they were not reporting that or asking her about that. But also just to bring in, you know, Mary Moriarty makes
Why
this,
weren't they asking her about it?
because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the narrative. There's a very
Because he is a black man?
right. I mean, race is everything that comes out of her mouth had to do with race. In Ryan Londrigan's case, she couldn't say enough that this was a white state trooper
Right.
who murdered a black man.
But we never heard any of that with the murder of Mitchell.
Of course not, because it went against the narrative, and that's what's really tragic, because it's helping to form public opinion. The way that they craft this really divisive messaging that has become so dangerous, and also not even just in the metro area. We're not talking just Hennepin, Ramsey County. We interview Booker Hodges in the documentary. He is the police chief for the Bloomington Police Department. This worry that these police leaders now have for their brave men and women each and every day, to try to catalog that more things that even Shannon talks about how Josh was considering a different profession before all of this. He had actually worked the riots, and she speaks to this in the documentary as well.
I have that if you'd like it, because I think it's a pretty powerful message in how she compares his time served in Iraq compared to serving
what happened
here.
during the riots. Great.
Read about it. I think he was more angry about it because he did come down here during that time. And there was a lot of them that were down here during that time that got hit with bricks and spit on and called all kinds of names. And I think with Josh's military experience that he was kind of numb to a lot of that type of behavior just because of being in Iraq and stuff. They dealt with a lot of people over there doing stuff like that, but not like in Minnesota. You just don't expect people to treat cops like that when they're trying to help the situation. So that part I think he was angry about. It was just the way people were acting down here.
Well, even more ironically, he and his wife apparently had talked about him changing jobs.
Right.
Right? Did he have a job lined up, or did he have a?
He'd been talking to a friend, kind of a construction job that he was looking at, because he would worry about every call, and this was after what took place with George Floyd and the officers involved there, and also and this is all on Walz's watch, which again we were kind of working on this before he was picked, and then we felt we got to get this out before the election, which was our intent then to get it out in October. But I think that is actually a more common story than people also realize, and nobody talks about that, how so many of these officers are just looking to get out as a result of the political climate in Minnesota.
When you factor in the attitudes of Jeremiah Ellison, Walz, Mary Moriarty, the law enforcement needs a cleaning of the house of the people we elect. And Hennepin County's done a wonderful job of electing the wrong people. And until Mary Moriarty's gone and the likes of Jeremiah Ellison are gone, the cops are still going to have to be sleeping with one eye open, because
Keith Ellison also, I'll add him to that list.
There's no reverence or fondness that they have for law enforcement, which factors into a belief I have that they're part of a mystery that's trying to bring about a different kind of America where even law enforcement is denigrated, because that suggests rules and regulations, and those are unfair, and they stem back to patriarchy and a flawed founding of the country, and I'm going on and on here. But this documentary sums up perfectly just what these law enforcement people have been facing since George Floyd, a little bit before, but George Floyd blew it up.
Yeah, and I think, we always like to report also on the ripple effect of all of this, because I don't think it really, people take a deep dive. For example, we did some reporting on a suicide that took place after the officer's death in Burnsville. Normally, there's rules about not reporting suicides, but this was a longtime nurse at Hennepin County who was.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, who could not stand that this took place again, and then took their own life. And also, I'll bring up just something that's in the documentary as well. Sean Ruge, who's the man with the glasses, the father of Matt Ruge, one of the Burnsville officers who lost his life, he died of a heart attack a month after we did the interview for the documentary.
Are you kidding me?
He lost his life. He died clutching his son's badge in his hand when he went back into Matt's house for the very first time.
You look like a young, fit guy that you were interviewing.
He absolutely was, but I honestly think that he died of a broken heart.
Oh, my God.
And people don't talk about that. And that's what people need to hear, the human toll that these decisions, really cause.
Holy mackerel. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, you look like a young.
He
I know
was.
he was the dad of the guy, but I bet he was in his late 50s.
But it's
maybe.
interesting you mentioned that, Liz, because my dad was a cop for 35 years.
Yeah.
But that's the part I don't think the public understands is the ripple effect. Where when you're a kid, you just want your dad to come home or your mom to come home or whatever.
Right.
I can't even imagine that. I did not know that, and that strikes hard, man. Wow.
Yeah, and actually doing the interview with him, it was remarkable as far as he's so well spoken, and he said, he thought about this for such a long time, and he even says in the interview, until the day I die, I will do everything I can to support law enforcement. And he was perfectly healthy and died a month later.
Do we know why Walz showed up at the Burnsville ceremony for the 3 fallen officers?
I've heard through some sources that the families of the police officers did not want him there at that funeral again, but that he had some connections with the firefighters. Adam Finseth, of course, was a fallen firefighter, so he went ahead and attended, but I think he was quickly escorted in and out because there were a lot of people that did not want him there. Another story we actually reported on at Alpha News that I thought was interesting. He was asked not to speak the day that the 3 first responders were killed in Burnsville, but yet he came anyway to the podium, and that did not sit well with city officials in Burnsville. But just a lot about his character when it comes to this, I think is newsworthy.
Well, here's how newsworthy it is. That's one of the principal duties of a governor is to be present at these times of remembrance and tragedy. And this guy had telegraphed his feelings so clearly that the survivors of these fallen officers didn't want him around, and it all stems from the George Floyd week of rioting. It all stems from his tardiness in bringing in the National Guard, his reluctance to do so. It stems from Fry saying at the destruction of the 3rd Precinct, it's just bricks and mortar. There was no understanding on the part of elected leaders in Minnesota of what was taking place. Zero understanding.
Well, Joe, you see it in the first, 90 seconds of the documentary where they show the images of the city on fire.
Right.
A reporter, and I don't know who the reporter was. It might have been you. I don't know. But in Fry's press conference saying, "What's your plan?" And his response was, in regards to, your city's on fire, you moron. What do you mean in regards to?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my words, not anybody.
So other than that, how are things going?
Yeah. This is pretty heavy. Yeah.
But it's important. It is heavy, but it's important.
No, and that's why I appreciate you guys. One of the very few who are, allowed me to talk about what we do over at Alpha News and these documentaries.
Isn't Channel 4 going to have you on?
Sadly, they have not asked me for an interview.
I thought
yet.
maybe they would.
See, why do you got to do like that, Joe?
I thought Tom Hauser and I would just probably talk after this for the news. But that's where we are, and actually, this ties into the documentary, and I actually think there's more to talk about too with the media and how much we just didn't even know about Walz as a result of the media.
My God,
in
what
town.
we learned. Yeah.
But the story about Shandon Owen not wanting Walz to be at the funeral, there was a mainstream media reporter who asked the question at a Walz press conference to say, do you have a response to this? Is this kind of true? that Shannon Owen has asked you not to be there, and that the person who asked the question got in trouble by Walz press people and saying, how dare you repeat this like right-wing talking point.
It's not a right-wing talking point.
As if it's not newsworthy that a law enforcement family doesn't want the governor of Minnesota at their...
terribly big news, and this tells you, again, more about what you need to know about this fraud.
And
it's just amazing.
And the audacity of that person tied to the walls.
His handlers, yeah.
My God.
Well, think about, I mean, I know you guys have talked about it, how he hasn't even asked or answered, I should say, a single local media question for months. I mean.
Well, he wasn't even here for how long?
Right.
Yeah. How many times have you guys invited him on the show?
4,
We gave
at least.
Okay.
At 4 in person. More online and, texting.
Well, I'm at the point now where I don't care if he
But
shows
he's
up.
told me to my face 4 times he will come on.
Well, don't worry about it.
Don't hold your breath.
I think number 5's not looking pretty good, is it?
And we did. I asked him for an interview for this documentary, for previous, and they don't even respond
Well,
to
at the
me at this
end
point.
of the documentary, you list the people who you asked for commentary, and all of them declined.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. Well, speaking of that, where you can find out about this kind of news and much more is the Center of the American Experiment. Their Golden Turkey Awards can be voted. No, can you vote on them?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you can vote on them right now because we're going to announce the winner November 27th on this show. But the nominations are now open to vote on what you think was the most ridiculous spending by Minnesota government. And that's really a hard job because there's been a lot of ridiculous spending. The Center of the American Experiment goes much deeper than that into the local scene, and a visit to their website every day would be highly recommended. But right now, you can go to American Experiment, one word, americanexperiment.org/golden turkey, and vote on what you think was the most ridiculous example of ridiculous spending by the Minnesota government. The winners will be announced for the 2024 Golden Turkey Award on November 27th here on Garage Logic. AmericanExperiment.org.